We all know that the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was based on the story of Ed Gein. That 127 hours is inspired by the actual feeling of talking to James Franco for a minute. But did you know that Nightmare on Elm Street, The Hills Have Eyes, and The Conjuring 2 all genuinely take inspiration from genuine events which genuinely actually happened? Genuinely! So let's find out how in our list of 7 horror movies based on real events. In at number 7, The Hills Have Eyes. The 1977 version and the 2006 remake of The Hills Have Eyes cover the story of a family whose car breaks down in an area inhabited by mutated psycho-cannibals, and both are set in the modern day. But this story was actually inspired by crimes committed several centuries ago by a clan of Scottish cannibals, which had 48 members and was headed by a man named Alexander Bean, nicknamed Sawney. The clan lived in Scotland sometime between the 13th and 16th centuries, and began when Sawney met a woman who was apparently as vicious as he was. The two of them produced their entire clan all on their own, with their 8 sons and 6 daughters all interbreeding with each other, and mom and dad, to create a further 18 grandsons and 14 granddaughters. That's nasty. Their home was a simple cave in the Highlands, and the clan spent most of their time there, occasionally venturing out at night in groups to ambush lone wanderers. Their victims were dragged back to the cave and dismembered for consumption, and many local villagers were unaware this clan even existed until folks started going missing. But when one man managed to escape the cannibal clan's clutches to warn others, King James VI of Scotland sent 400 men and bloodhounds after them, and they were treated with as much mercy as they'd given others. Upon their capture, the clansmen had their genitals, hands, and feet sliced off and were left to bleed to death, whereas the women and children were burnt alive at the stake. Their cave was later found to be scattered with human remains, and historians believe this one clan may have been responsible for murdering and eating over 1,000 people. At 6, the Amityville Horror. The Amityville horror movies are based on a book by author Jay Anson, released in 1977, which claims to have documented the real experiences of the Lutz family after moving into their new home on 112 Ocean Avenue. The home had lain empty for 13 months since the DeFeo murders, where Ronald DeFeo Jr. killed his entire family using a rifle. DeFeo has been held at the Greenhaven Correctional Facility since 1974, but to this day, he maintains his original insanity plea, claiming that he heard his family's voices saying they were plotting to kill him. After the remains of the DeFeos were mopped up and someone sprayed a little air freshener around the place, George and Kathy Lutz moved into the home with their 3 children, presumably after the greatest piece of salesmanship by a real estate agent in history, because even though the broker told them what happened here, the family said they were still happy to move in. Must have been in a good school district or something. But this happiness didn't last long, because even after having the place blessed by a priest, the family began to experience a series of horrific paranormal events, including vivid murderous nightmares, terrifying apparitions, and slime coming from the walls, with random smells, sensations, and sounds felt throughout the house. 5-year-old Missy Lutz even gained a demonic imaginary friend who was a pig-like creature called Jody. And George Lutz started to realize he resembled Ronald DeFeo, even taking to drinking at his favorite bar. But the Lutzes couldn't get the priest to return to their home for a second shot at a blessing because he'd developed blisters and stigmata after his last visit. And so, on January 14th, 28 days after moving in, the Lutzes left the home, never to return. And despite its more recent owners have reported no paranormal activity since then, the real-life tale of the Amityville Horror continues to inspire a bazillion spin-offs to this day. At 5. A Nightmare on Elm Street. Surely, the story of a burnt guy with knives for fingers who dresses like a goth kid to murder you in your dreams can't be based on a real story, can it? Oh, yes it can. Wes Craven admitted that his inspiration for Freddy Krueger was an article in the New York Times about a family of Cambodian immigrants. The family had escaped the mass government murders, which were occurring in Cambodia under the bloodthirsty tyrant Pol Pot. But the experience clearly left a lasting impression on one of the family's sons as he continued to experience horrific nightmares even after escaping to safety in the U.S. On one night, his parents heard the boy screaming louder than anything they'd ever heard before. And when they got to him, he was dead, having died of fright, thanks to a dream based on a real-life nightmare. Number 4. The Dentist. The Dentist was a poorly received 1996 movie which gave a bit part to a then unknown and not yet woke Mark Ruffalo, and it concerned the story of a dental surgeon who goes on a hallucinogenic killing spree after finding out his wife is boning the pool guy. And if you've got a dental appointment coming up, you might want to skip this next part, because The Dentist was based on the real-life serial killer, Glennon Engelman. Engelman wasn't as creepy as the guy in the movie, though, because whereas the dentist's lead character accidentally stabs kids in the face and cuts out women's tongues, Engelman was actually a cold, calculating killer who moonlighted as a hitman around the St. Louis area. He was responsible for at least 7 contract kills during his lifetime, with his preferred methods being the car bomb and a subtle bludgeoning to death with a sledgehammer. So the next time your dentist asks if you've been flossing, you might want to tell the truth. Number 3. Wolf Creek. 2005's Wolf Creek told the story of 2 British soldiers backpacking across Australia with their Aussie friend from Sydney. And after being taken captive, tortured, and then escaping, they spend the rest of the movie being hunted down through the outback by a serial killer who's more beast than man. The villain of the piece, Mick Taylor, is based heavily on 2 real-life outback murderers called Ivan Milat and Bradley Murdoch. Milat was convicted of murdering 7 backpackers and suspected in the deaths of 5 more between 1989 and 1993, with his victims shot, stabbed, and decapitated after lengthy torture. He is currently serving 7 consecutive life sentences for the crimes, and in 2009 his cousin was himself sentenced to 43 years for a copycat killing. But more closely related to the film is the story of Bradley Murdoch, who was accused of murdering English backpacker Peter Falconio. Falconio was traveling across Australia in a car with his girlfriend Joanne Lees late at night when Murdoch flagged them down for help with his own vehicle. Falconio got out to help while Lees remained inside, and the next thing she heard was a gunshot. Murdoch then grabbed Lees out of the vehicle and tied her up while he was moving Falconio's corpse, but she managed to escape by flagging down a truck driver. Falconio's body was never found, and after being caught and sentenced to 28 years in prison, Murdoch will be eligible for parole in 2032. Oh, and as a sweet little promo stunt, the movie Wolf Creek was released during the actual trial of Bradley Murdoch, with screenings banned in the state where the trial was held, for fear it would have swayed the jury. Probably a wise move. At 2, The Conjuring 2. The second Conjuring movie, which hit cinemas in 2016, is based on the true story of the Enfield poltergeist, which is said to have terrorized two young sisters living in a council house in Enfield, England during the 1970s. The girls told their mother that furniture had been moving by itself, and when a police constable was called to visit, even she admitted to seeing a chair move without anyone touching it, and police officers never lie. Ever. But these poltergeists weren't just interested in a little feng shui, because they then began to throw toys, hurl rocks, levitate children, and chant in strange demonic voices at the family, all of which witnessed by independent observers. In the years since these ghostly going-ons, the girls have been accused of faking the incidents for attention, with studies even going so far as to demonstrate how they may have produced the demonic voices and used sleight of hand to deceive the police officer. But that didn't stop the movie folks from running with the story. And why would they, when it earned them a cool $320 million? Nice trick, girls. Thanks for the cash. And at number 1, The Bell Witch. Forget one movie. How about a tale so weird and creepy it inspired a whole bunch, including The Blair Witch Project, An American Haunting, and several crappy movies with some variation of the name Bell Witch in them. These films are based on the story of John Bell, an American farmer whose torturous death turned into one of the most famous ghost stories in Southern America. Bell's troubles began in 1817 when he and his daughter, Betsy, reported hearing strange voices, extinguished lights, and seeing a goblin-like creature in and around their home. This animal, which gained the nickname the Bell Witch, then began attacking Bell, his family members, and the local community, with nobody able to kill the thing before it ran away. These incidents led future U.S. President and then Senator Andrew Jackson to visit the farmstead. But even he couldn't prevent John Bell's slow descent into madness. Bell's trauma in fighting the goblin caused him to suffer violent seizures and hallucinations, and these continued until his death 3 years later, with Bell adamant throughout that the witch was behind his troubles. It has since been speculated that Bell was suffering from a neurological disorder which shows very similar symptoms. But to John Bell, this haunting must have seemed all too real. And that's our list. But if you're looking for another pop culture fix, why not try our recent video on the 10 strangest fan theories? Because did you know that Toy Story 3 might be based on the Holocaust? Yeah, we're not making it up, although we kind of wish we were. So check it out and ruin your favorite childhood movie, why don't ya?